Another great program for you today. Hey, from Pratham USA, which is a great organization, we have Asha Dhume, who is the president and a member of the board of directors of Pratham here in the Houston area. And then we have Vikas Bahl, and Vikas is the director of development. Welcome, guys, to the Nonprofit Leadership Studio. And I think this is really quite interesting, right? This is an organization based in the United States, raising lots of money for India, right? And primarily we see a lot of members of the Indian community that are giving to this organization. It's a sort of a unique model. Asha, how did you end up being a part of Pratham and doing the work that you're doing? And you're a volunteer, but doing the stuff that you're doing for them.
Yeah, I've been volunteering for the past 7 years, and my husband actually got on the board first, and when his term was done, I started helping out, and that's when I became more and more involved every year.
And what is it about Pratham that really sort of motivates you, that gets you excited?
The mission of Pratham is every child in school and learning well. So education, that is the key word that got me interested into doing more for Pratham.
One of the things that I'll often talk about is that education seems to be the thing that I grew up as a child in poverty, and education seems to be the great equalizer, right? To move children from one level to another economically, it's education. Are you finding it's the same thing in India?
Absolutely. India is a developing country, so education is the biggest game changer that can change it from a developing to a developed country and take it out of the inevitable cycle of exploitation, poverty, unemployment. I think education is that one thing that can really change the way India is in the next few years. So.
And the members of the community here in the United States that are giving to Pratham, is it primarily members of the Indian community? Is it both? What do you?
It's I would like to say 80% Indian community, but we do have 20% of the local people from here as well who believe in education, whether it's in India or here or anywhere else in the world.
Yeah. It's interesting, as I talk to members of the Indian community, many times one of the first things they'll say is, have you ever heard of the Pratham? People...
I'm glad to hear that. I'm really glad to hear that,
I hope when you talk about development in the United States, people say, well, have you heard of Children at Risk? But I know that's probably not the thing.
Hopefully very soon.
Yeah, exactly.
Very soon, yeah.
Vikas, your role as the Director of Development, and talk a little bit about how you got into this yourself.
Sure. So I actually was born and raised in the U.S. However, being from India or having that, the Indian descent, I often spent a lot of time as a child back in India. And on, many of my trips, I would always, notice the disparity and the poverty in India, and it just always kind of struck me and, stuck with me, and it just, something wasn't right. And so I always had this kind of inkling to sort of be kind of involved and make a change and do something. So, I had an opportunity to work, in the corporate space for several years here in the U.S., and then decided to kind of make a switch into the nonprofit space, and decided to move to India for a couple of years, do some work on the ground there, and unfortunately ended up back here with Pratham USA.
And you went to UT undergrad, University of Texas undergrad. You went to Rice University for your MBA.
I did. And
did you ever think, while you're paying all this money to go to Rice, did you ever think, well, I'm going to end up working at a nonprofit?
Yeah, don't ask my wife that question. But,
or your mom and dad, right?
Absolutely. No, I mean, I didn't. No, I mean, definitely not during my undergrad days. I went to undergrad, I went into consulting, and did that for about 10 years. But as I said, there was always this kind of calling, if you will, that I wanted to be doing work in the development space or in the nonprofit space of it. So it was actually during business school, a very non-traditional move, to actually make the decision to switch to the nonprofit space. And fortunately, Rice has some great courses just like this one where you can get involved and get exposed to
I have spoken many times at Rice and talked about sort of the nonprofit world. And there is an interest, and I think to any business school you go to, people are genuinely interested in the nonprofit world.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's many opportunities to get involved with nonprofits locally in Houston and get exposed to international development and social enterprise. And that kind of actually helped me kind of make that move and that change in that part of my life.
Asha, when we talk about giving in the Indian community, is there a different sense of wanting to give in the Indian community than you might find in other communities in the United States?
I think there's more giving with the Indians here than the Indians back home.
Sure,
because there people are still struggling to make ends meet, and the concept of giving has not really sunk in as much as it has sunk in here. Here we all believe that our country gave us the tools to flourish in this country, in our adopted country here. So, we all want to give back and make sure they all do well and, just.
And how often do you get to go back and sort of see the fruit of your labor here in terms of raising?
I make it a point to go every few months, at least 3 times a year.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I need to go and see what I'm doing here. I need to believe in what I do here, right?
So. And give us an idea in terms of how you're raising the money here and then what's happening with that money. I mean, are you visiting people and asking them for money? Are you doing house parties? What is sort of a common way of raising money within the Indian community here in Houston?
So we have 2 main events here in Houston. One of them is our annual gala, which is coming up on the 12th of May.
Okay.
It's at Hilton Americas right here in downtown.
Nice and big, so a lot of people can go.
Nice and big because we have over 800 people attending this event.
Very good.
And then we have a second event in December, which is the holiday luncheon at the Junior League. That's a much smaller event, about 250 people. And at the gala, we are looking to raise somewhere between 1 million and 2 million. And at the luncheon, we raise somewhere between 100 and 200,000.
So raising at a gala between $1 million and $2 million, that's a substantial amount.
Yes, it is.
Is it mostly sponsorships that you're getting the money through?
Sponsorships and individual donors.
Wow.
It's a year-long effort. I mean, for this gala, I started last year. Both of us have been making calls almost on a daily basis. Lots of phone calls, a lot of cold calls. But it does. I mean, you make it work.
There are certain galas in the community that if you're wealthy and you live in River Oaks, you almost feel like you have to go to, right? So maybe the Opera Ball is one of the ones that you have to go to. It's sort of be seen, and if you're part of society, it's what you do. Is the gala that you guys, what's the name of your gala, by the way?
It's just Pratham Gala.
The Pratham Gala.
Yes, yeah.
So is the Pratham Gala, if you have made it in the Indian community, is it sort of considered you're probably going to do this?
Yes, it is. It is the premier gala in the Indian community because our tickets are the most expensive because our goals are much higher. And to raise and to reach those goals, we have to keep higher ticket prices. But we find that we are still sold out every year. So obviously there's a lot of desire to give back, and that's why we are able to do what we do.
And do you do money the night of as well? Do you raise things the night of? Vikas, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So absolutely, just to add to what Asha's saying, I mean, a good chunk of our fundraising is individual donors, and we definitely go out and sell sponsorships, and there's wonderful companies in the Houston community that support us. But on the night of, we try to leverage both the pledge drive. We try to bring some beneficiaries out here from India who can actually speak to the audience.
Nice.
It's a way for them to
pull
connect.
at the heartstrings,
Absolutely.
right?
And it's a way for them to actually connect and see someone that's actually going through the programs or and being impacted by this. So we do that, and we run a successful pledge drive, as well as we try to have a fun auction, so both the silent and live auction, and do fairly well, to raise some funds on the night of with the guests that are attending.
Yeah. Is it a fun gala to go to?
Yeah, it's always a celebration, so we have to add the entertainment. We have to keep people interested throughout the evening. We get. Are you familiar with Bollywood?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Do you do some Bollywood stuff?
We try and get a Bollywood actress from India every year, and then we do a fashion show with the top designer from India or some local entertainment. So we have different things planned for this year's gala.
I think my favorite food is Indian food, right? Oh. So and I've had my staff say, Dr. Bob, you could eat Indian food every day, and there's a whole subcontinent that eats Indian food every day, right? And it's delicious food. So when you go to these galas, are you immersed in Indian culture? If I go to the gala this year, am I going to get great food?
Great food for sure. I don't know about being immersed in Indian culture because you will not see most, except the clothes that people will be in. You won't really see much of the cultural aspect of India.
I just need to go to India, right?
You absolutely must go to India for that. And you must visit a Pratham school there.
Yeah, I will. Asha, tell me, what is the most difficult thing for you in terms of your fundraising? What is the biggest challenge that you run into?
Biggest challenge is making the connection to the right person. Because once you make the connection, if you're persistent, you do see the results. It is just making that connection, because you hear of all these wealthy people that are out there. But getting that connection, getting the foot in the door is, in my opinion, my biggest challenge.
And just being from Pratham, does that often help?
Not always, because there are many charities. I mean, Houston is a very charitable city, so there are many charities and all great causes. So, to get them interested in Pratham, so that's a challenge right there.
Because what do you think is the biggest challenge?
I think one of the biggest challenges we face is, being an organization where the programs are actually on the ground halfway across the world. Sometimes it's very difficult to tap into a lot of resources. I mean, we know Houston, like Asha said, is one of the most philanthropic places in the country. There's a lot of giving happening here, and there's a lot of charity. However, there's a lot of funds we're unable to tap into just because a lot of it's usually committed to local initiatives or things happening in the backyard here and whatnot. So, breaking through to the non-Indian community, for example, is a little bit more challenging, unless someone has an inclination to want to give towards global development, education, or is looking at these kinds of initiatives. So I think that's definitely a challenge. I think in the Indian, within the Indian American community itself, we're quite successful. As Asha said, we're one of the premier organizations. We've been around for 20 years. We've established a great reputation, but there are a lot of organizations. There's a lot of Indian-focused charity as well, and there's a lot of galas happening. So putting on a premier event, putting on something that people want to come to year on year, and then of course the fundamentals of development, right? Making sure you're nurturing and engaging your donors on an ongoing basis. I mean, it's a very, very key thing that we need to do. Thanking, nurturing, supporting.
What's the most important thing, do you think? And one of the things I ask people here a lot is, what do you think is the most important thing in development? For you, Vikas, what is it?
I think the most important thing in development is probably engaging and thanking your existing donor base.
That's stewardship, right?
Stewardship, absolutely, absolutely. I think it's a fact, and we all know that, getting your existing donor base to up their giving or get more involved is a lot easier than to go out there and hunt and bring in new donors. And so the right balance of that, not forgetting that growth comes from within, is very important to remember when you're looking at your donor base and you're looking at how to grow your organization.
Asha, for you, what do you think is?
I think on the same lines, it's like keeping your clients happy, keeping the donors committed to your cause year after year, and having them believe in you, believing in what you do. I think that is.
Do you work really hard at maintaining relationships, especially with your biggest givers?
Very much, very much. A lot of personal interactions, personal phone calls. Lunches, dinners, just not just showing up at their door when we need the money, but keeping up a relationship all through the year. Yes.
And my guess is that you develop a lot of genuine friendships out of that, right?
Absolutely. That's I think one of the biggest benefits that has personally worked for me. You meet some great like-minded people. Everybody wants to give back, but these are some very serious, committed people who have a mission and they go about doing it. So.
One of the things that we study in the study of philanthropy and study of giving is that sometimes people like myself and others that you grow up, and many in India, right? You grow up in poverty, right? You don't have a lot of money. And when you get to that point when you're able to give, it's a transition. It's sometimes harder to give. Do you find some of that where people who've come over from India and the sort of, in a sense, they've made it here, but making that transition to learning how to give is something that's challenging, Vikas?
I absolutely. I mean, I think, the thing that's great about America is it's a philanthropic country, right? And it's and so I think the folks that have come here, are able to, get ingrained in that kind of philosophy and that thinking. And so, I think people who have done extremely well, by and large, do want to give back. Now, where to give back is the challenge, right? Because there's a lot of options.
And how much? They have to learn to give bigger numbers, don't they?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, there's a lot of pulls, right? I mean, just talking about the Indian American community, as I mentioned, there's many organizations that are doing similar things that we are in terms of fundraising here in the U.S. for programs back in India. And so, what do you support? How much do you give? How much do you give back here locally too, right? Because ultimately, this country gave us a lot. Right, and we want to give back here as well. So that's obviously a challenge. But I would say, at least my exposure in the last few years has definitely been that the Indian community and those who have done well do tend to come to that point where they'd like to give back and they'd like to get involved.
Is it hard to get to that point, Asha?
It's hard, but it's not impossible.
Yeah.
You just,
and sometimes it's just time, I would guess, right?
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes there are donors that you have to work for a couple of years to get them to see the way you do things.
And if they see others that grew up like them, it becomes a little bit easier, doesn't it?
Yes,
you say, this is sort of what I need to be doing.
And then all the events that we do, all the awareness that we try and spread in the community, so people try and want to do what the others are doing. So.
I think that's exactly right. When you think of the work that you put into this, Asha, I mean, how many hours a week are you spending? And you're a volunteer. You're
24/7, 365 days of the year.
Wow.
I just think, eat, breathe, Pratham. I mean, both of us at this point. because this
Except
is a
Vikas is paid. You're
Yeah,
not paid.
I'm
right?
paid a little bit.
Doesn't matter.
So-
I mean,
sometimes-
that's not the point. It's,
Sometimes I feel she works a lot more hours than I do.
no, but there's
which is
passion.
wonderful.
Whether you're getting
Yeah.
paid or not, there's real passion to make sure that it's a success, whatever you
Yeah.
have taken up. So
And your board, you said you have about 30 members of the
32
board?
32
And are
members,
they
yeah.
all, they're not all working as much as you are, but are they working a lot?
Some of them do try and help.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's a financial commitment, and that is also a very important part of how we get where we want to get. So
Yeah. Do you get a sense, Vikas, that you're very lucky to have the board that you have and to have the chair of a board, the president of the board, like Asha?
Absolutely. I mean, I think our success thrives completely on the kind of board that we have. We have, as Asha mentioned, we have about 15 chapters, and each chapter, spread around the country, and each chapter has an executive board, that's driving this, all volunteers,
Yeah.
all, giving their time, giving their money, giving their resources. There is no way we would get, just to, last year we raised $20 million as an organization in the U.S.
In the United
In
States?
the United
US, yeah.
States.
Wow.
it was the
For-
highest we had raised.
And what is Houston, how much does Houston represent? Is that
About
3
1.4.
million? Oh, okay.
About
1.1.
1.6, 1.8
Yeah.
of that, 1.6.
So a nice
1.8.
share of that, yeah.
Yeah, and Houston was actually the founding chapter of Pratham USA. Pratham USA was founded here in Houston by by a group of folks here, and it was nurtured and kind of organically grown out of here. And ambassadors and volunteers traveled around the country and spoke to people and pitched the organization. And so it's been 20 years now, almost. Next year will be 20 years. And 20 years later, we're 20 million strong, 15, like I said, 15 boards, about 250 board members, and we got a staff of about 18 to 20 folks.
Wow.
That are supporting them.
I think what is unique about Pratham is 90% of the funds we collect here goes back to India.
Yeah, that's a big
we
deal,
have the
isn't it?
lowest administrative cost of any other charity, based in India.
And Asha, you're also on another board on Lighthouse,
The
right?
Lighthouse of Houston,
And
yeah.
compare that board to, when you sit in that board meeting, what do you think about in terms of the differences?
I am not a very active member in that
Yeah.
board because this does take up a lot of my time. But I was involved in another organization called Club 24, and that's when they invited me to be part of that board,
Okay.
because I organized a couple of events for them. Some very different kind of events where we blindfolded the members and we had them eat their meal blindfolded.
Oh, yes.
To have them experience
For
what-
Lighthouse, yeah.
to have them experience.
Yeah.
So my role more there is to spread awareness about what they do. And Lighthouse is not a fundraising organization. They get a
Yeah.
lot of government support. So I just attend the meetings. I do whatever little bit I can to spread awareness. But this is my main role here on this board here.
Yeah. When you have a board as good as you have, and so if I ask you, what's the biggest challenge with your board? What would you say, Vikas?
I would say, one thing that I would say is that we have a great board. And
Yeah.
like Asha said, we've got about 32 people, 32 executive board members. Personally, my challenge would be, I've got Asha and she's working 24/7, and we've got another handful of folks that definitely step up on certain committees and this and that. But we do have an extended board that, again, they give generously. So and that's
fine.
one of the most important things. But
Yeah.
I would love to see our board, more engaged and sometimes, and
Yeah.
especially when it comes to fundraising. Maybe helping us make more networks and more connections in communities. So now again, some of them do, and some of them actually
Yeah.
help us reconnect year on year and hold those relationships. But with the 32-person board, if you think 32 board members could hold X amount of relationships, we could we
could do a
be
lot
doing
more
significantly
even.
more.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think
And you see other organizations that are able to do stuff like that, right? So it's interesting to have a strong board. Asha, Houston loves events, right? We love big
Yes,
events
they
in
do.
Houston.
Yes, they do.
When you look at some of the other Pratham's chapters, is the event their main thing? Is that sort of the model?
Yeah, most chapters have only one event. Houston is the only chapter that does two big
two,
events in the
yeah.
year. Houston.
So they're all using the model of an event,
Yes,
though, right?
because
Yeah.
I think that model works.
Yeah.
It's good to have small campaigns all through the year.
Okay.
But people, at least Indians, specifically love to celebrate, love to dress up, love to be seen in events like this. So the gala model works for us. It's been working for years.
And who doesn't like Bollywood stuff, right? So
Yep.
that's good. All right, so let's go to the Twitterverse. A bunch of questions have just come in. Okay. So this is Tanya Castellano wants to know, since gala tickets are so expensive for the Pratham event, more expensive maybe than other. How much is a ticket?
It's $500 per
Okay,
ticket.
so
Yeah.
there are other
That's-
events that are,
yeah, yeah.
It's all in the sponsorships is where you're making
Yeah,
the money, right,
yeah.
in the night of, yeah.
In the tables, yeah.
So how do you convince, so Tony's question is, how do you convince or market to sponsors the idea that this is the event that they should go to or sponsor?
I think the visibility that any organization will get being part of an event adds a lot of value to the organization. And a lot of corporates look for that.
Yeah.
Being seen on a Pratham, the flyer that we put out, I think that's very important.
Yeah.
So that's a marketing tool right there.
What would you add, Vikas?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of our sponsors, especially our if you look at our corporate sponsorship in the community, it comes from a lot of our networks of our board members or our donors. You'll see a lot of financial institutions, a lot of banks, a lot of vendors, folks who really want to also be, networking and in the room with with some key folks in the Indian community, because obviously there's a vested interest in them for that. So it's easy to market the event because it is a premier event and it's recognized as a premier event. So sponsorships in that sense are easier to come by.
Because Susanna Mikulin wants to know, with a board of 32, there must be some conflict. Not everyone agrees, probably 100% of the time. How do you handle conflict with a big board like that?
It's a good question. I mean, I don't think that we've necessarily seen too much conflict.
Yeah,
I mean,
just
we
a
have
couple
a
of-
I don't think you have to have conflict.
Yeah, we have a
Yeah.
very smooth process and smooth structure. I think everybody gets along very well. I mean, there's obviously difference of opinions, but that's part of any board, and that's the whole purpose of a board and of a board meeting is to bring all the opinions to the table, have a discussion, take a vote, make a decision, and move on. And I think we do that actually quite effectively and quite smoothly without much.
Asha, I've been on many boards that are very well run and very smooth. But even some of those, every once in a while, a new board member comes in who's disruptive. Have you ever had that happen in your time where you've had someone who's maybe a little disruptive?
Not disruptive, difference of opinions maybe, but never disruptive, because these
that's
are all very good members of the society.
Yeah.
So
I've had good members that were disruptive,
Yeah.
but it's good when you don't
fortunately
have it.
or unfortunately, I haven't had that.
That's good. Yeah, I hope you never have that. Stacy McKenzie wants to know, Asha, what kind of progress have you seen in India with educational opportunities from when you started to now? What are some of the big differences that you're seeing?
So the numbers wise, since we started, we have educated 50 million children. So, and now we have spread into, Read India is the core model, which is education.
Yeah.
Now we have moved on to women empowerment. That's something that we've started in the past 6 years. And now occasional training, which is all built up on education, but these are the different branches that we have moved on to.
Talk about a little bit about the girl empowerment programs that you guys are doing, because in a lot of developing countries around the world, we see significant advances in the country when we focus on young women. And so tell us a little bit, give us an example of a village where you've seen some of the work that you're doing make a difference.
So Vikas has gone and visited these villages.
Oh,
So
okay.
he's actually gone and lived
absolutely.
there.
So one of the programs actually that we've been doing for a few years now is called Second Chance, and it's an opportunity for girls, young girls and women who have dropped out of the school system. Basically, by the time eighth grade, half of the girls drop out of school in India.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge problem. So we started this program to, in a 1-year intense course to get girls ready and prepared to take the 10th grade examination in India, which is basically the equivalent of passing high school.
Yep.
And we started these centers across the country and have had immense success in building foundational skill sets, and then leveraging the core syllabus on top of that to where we're about 79% of the girls who go through our program actually pass that examination.
Wow.
So it's phenomenal. So we're seeing these young girls do this. We're seeing now, other women from the communities, the mothers, recognizing the value of education.
Are there obstacles sometimes in villages in terms of, talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely, absolutely. When we go in and try to run a program, it's not as simple as saying, let's go start a program and we're going to make a difference, right? You have to really invest in the community and really get the community's buy-in. So you have to make sure, when we're trying to go and get a girl to basically come to this program, for example, to get their high school education, you have to go in, you have to educate the community, you have to educate, the villagers, you have to educate the parents, the grandparents, the siblings, the uncles, the aunties. You really have to focus on the entire village and the community to make them realize and understand that there is significant great value, not only to this individual, but to the actual community in the village, in this girl going back and getting her education, and then becoming part of the economic cycle, and then adding back to their own family, their village, their community, the country. You know, I mean, that's has to be understood. So it's a lot of effort and a lot of investment you have to make on that.
It's probably amazing for both of you when you go back to see the changes that are happening, right?
Yeah. I mean, when you educate a girl, you're educating the whole family.
Yeah.
I think the benefits are multifold when you do that.
Yeah.
We have cases where 3 generations are studying together. So it's very, very heartwarming to see that. When you go back.
And to see such, I mean, in many developing countries, you just see dramatic increases, right? And so you guys are seeing some of that. It's amazing. When you go into some of the bigger cities, are advancements less marked? Are they less sort of remarkable, or are you seeing it all across the spectrum there?
I think it's pretty much all across. Yeah. We are, I think, spread out in 20 states out of 26. So it's all across the country. Yeah.
Wow. Trevin Oliver wants to know, Asha, in your time raising money for Pratham, what's the one most memorable gift that you've received, and how did you get there?
I am in the process of working on one of the
This
most
is
memorable
gonna
gifts,
be
but
the
I can't
memorable
share the details till it comes through.
Is there one that your
There's
second
one
most
that we may
memorable?
be ready to announce very soon, but it's very, very exciting when when something like this comes across and out of nowhere.
Yeah.
You're just actually I would say there are 2.
Give
so let me
us-
talk about
yeah,
something
give us
else
an
that
example
happened.
that you can talk
yeah.
about,
So I was at a lunch at very recently. I was sitting next to somebody. I said, I'm the president for Pratham, and can you support my organization by being a sponsor? He said, I don't have any budget here in this this year. I said, but you have operations in India. Can you do something for me in India? And this was somebody that I'd never ever met before. He was somebody totally new to me.
Wow.
But that's something you learn. You just learn to break across the barriers and just go and.
It doesn't hurt to
It
ask
doesn't hurt.
sometimes,
All
right?
you can get is a no. So
Yeah.
he said, okay, let me see what I can do in India. I followed up with him. He wrote an email to his department in India, and believe it or not, in 3 weeks, we got a sanction of $45,000.
Nice.
So that is a moment that I will never ever forget.
Yeah,
And
wow.
now, and the other one that's coming up shortly.
It's going to be even better, the other
It's
one
going
that's
to be
coming
much,
up
much
shortly.
bigger, hopefully, yeah.
So next time you're here, you'll be able to talk
Yes, yeah.
about that one. You talked a little bit about stewardship, Vikas. Do you use, let me get this, what stewardship programs do you use for your donors since your organization is not in the United States? I mean, you're bringing people from India here, but how do you sort of communicate some of that to some of your donors talking about your programs?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we look at various initiatives to kind of connect with our donors. So it's a very good question because, connecting folks is a very, very important thing in a nonprofit to the cause and to the programs. And being halfway across the world, that's obviously a big challenge for us. But, we try to accomplish that by one I mentioned, we bring beneficiaries here, at least during our gala seasons, and they'll go around and they'll meet with donors and attend these events and speak at these events. We also hold what we call our salon series, which are more or less small groups, small gatherings, whether it's a small dinner or an event of 20 to 25 to 30 key people, key donors or prospects that we bring together. And we do various things such as we will have someone from the team in India meet them. We'll have someone from the U.S. leadership team meet with them. But it's really just an opportunity to bring like-minded people together, be in a setting where they can learn a little bit about Pratham and have an opportunity to socialize and network with like-minded folks. And so we try to do those throughout the year as well, and we call them salons. But I think that's something that a lot of nonprofits have kind of taken up in terms of stewardship. It's a great way to connect and keep in touch with your donor base. And then obviously we have a great marketing team and marketing communications team. What we realize is we need to keep producing great content, whether it's social media, videos, materials, presentations, and constantly have that being exposed to our communities, because they always want to see the information. They always crave for what's new and stuff. So we've got to now we're actually building our communications teams and efforts now that we're growing as an organization as well. As far as hiring our own folks maybe in India to do our communications work for us, because we got a different audience and a different take on what we need to show. So a lot of those kinds of
every organization uses a different number for what is a major gift for them. For some it's 1,000, some it's 5, some it's 10. What is a major gift for you guys? What's the number that you usually use for that?
So that's a very interesting question.
Yeah.
We just came off a national conference. Pratham
Yeah.
USA held a national conference this last weekend at Princeton, which was attended by 70 to 80 of our board members and staff from around the country. And we spend a good amount of time talking about major gifts and developing a strong, substantial major gifts program in the next few years. And the major gifts...
It's a big deal, right?
It's a big deal.
It could really move an organization ahead.
Absolutely. Outside of the gala, which is our flagship kind of marquee event, major gifts is the next kind of segment where we're focusing our attention because we know a large growth comes from major gifts. I don't have an answer for you because we have chapters that are very diverse in their culture, in their communities, where they are in terms
and communities give at different levels, don't they?
Exactly, where they are in terms of the life cycle of the organization.
Yeah.
So a New York or a Houston will give you a larger number. I would maybe tag it as $25,000 or $50,000.
Okay.
Whereas some of our smaller chapters will maybe say $10,000.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting question at the right time because this is something we're looking at as an organization to see, how do we approach that and develop the right kind of strategy and program around that.
So if there's a member of the community, Asha, who regularly gives you $15,000 a year, right, which is nice, right? It's maybe not $25,000, but it's nice. How many times are you or Vikas going out and talking to this, sort of meeting them personally throughout the year? How many times in a year would you touch them?
On an average, maybe 3 or 4 times. But then, most of us are connected socially. So you end up seeing them at many social events all through the year. And you make it a point to go say hello to them, So.
Yeah, that's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
And then you're probably sending a lot more email and a lot of communication with these guys.
And it's interesting, just to add to that, that's also, the function of a board, if you will, in this kind of organization. Because formally, there may be, these touch points that we institute, but our entire board of 32 people are out there in the community, and they're constantly meeting people and talking to people.
They are ambassadors for the cause.
Right, they're ambassadors. So that constant, awareness or discussion about the organization is happening, even informally in that structure, which is wonderful.
Asha, when you look around Houston and you see other nonprofits, and do you see other nonprofits sometimes? Maybe it's the Opera, maybe it's Texas Children's Hospital, but you think those, I see them enough. Those are some good fundraising operations, and maybe you, Vikas, maybe you see this. But are there other organizations that you've seen that you think, oh, I would like to be that good? Are there some?
I don't think I want to compare myself to
I know,
anybody, but every event that I go, which is non-Pratham, I try and come back with a few things. The way they hold the pledge drive, or the way they host their events, or. But I think each one is doing very well in their own space. So we just try to do better than what we did last year. So it's just so much more easier.
That's diplomatic. I mean, because are there some organizations that you feel like, wow, they're doing a really nice job?
Yeah, I would. I look at this a little bit differently. I would almost compare. If I'm going to do a comparison, I would compare myself to international development organizations.
So UNICEF and someone like that.
Right, UNICEF, or maybe even well, first line of competitors would be other nonprofits who are doing work in India.
Who are some of those?
There's organizations. There's an organization called Magic Bus. There's that does mentoring and sports through development. There's an organization called Akshay Patra that does midday meals. There's a couple of other nonprofits that work in education as well. And so that's I would look at them first.
Where you compare,
at least to do a comparison. And as we had mentioned earlier, we've been quite successful and quite fortunate to be the leader at this point amongst those. If I went out there and looked at organizations like Rooms to Read, and those kind of guys who are doing significantly well, I think that's where I would aspire for us to look at. How do we get to, and we're talking about how do we get to 50 million, 100 million in the next 5, 6, 7 years, and the strategy around that. And I think we would kind of take some, initiative and learnings from there.
But Asha, to your point, right, that's how we learn, I guess, right? Is you see what's going on at these other places, right? And but at the same time, you tell your own board, right? We're doing, and
we could do better, but I mean, we are doing well, but we could always do better. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's part of the development world, right? We always want to do better for children, for others around us, right? So Nakia Holmes wants to know, when trying to get new donors for something internationally, so brand new donors, what are your biggest challenges? What are your toughest challenges for brand new donors, Asha?
Trying to sell them the concept that the money is going somewhere else, which is needed more than it's needed here. I think that is definitely the biggest challenge.
That is a hard thing,
It
right?
is, it is, it definitely is. Especially new donors who don't know much about India or about Pratham or not passionate about education. It definitely is, because not everybody is passionate about education. Some may be passionate about healthcare, some may
Right.
want to do in some other space. So that is definitely a big challenge.
And not that anything is more important than the other,
No,
right?
absolutely not. I mean, every cause is very important. So.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest challenge?
I don't think we have any challenges. We're doing great.
I can write down a list of challenges we do, but
Okay. And Reagan wants to know, how often do each of you travel to India, and how long do you stay there?
I travel for personal reasons, but every time I go, I make it a point to go and visit Pratham.
Yeah. So, and you go 3 times a year or
Yeah,
so.
on
And
an
how long are
average.
you staying there?
2-3 weeks.
2-3 weeks?
Yeah, I have a lot of
That's
family
a
there.
lot,
I don't
yeah.
have any family here. All my family is in India, and that's
And
the
what
reason
part
I
of
go.
India do you go
Mumbai,
to? Mumbai,
which is like the New York of the
yeah.
US. So
The
yeah,
Uh,
big
main
city, right?
The big city, yeah.
And yourself, Vikas?
I get out there once a year, at least once a year from a work perspective.
Yeah.
Short trip because you can't be away from the family too long, but in a matter of 8 to 10 days, I'm able to fortunately hit up 3 or 4 different cities, villages across different parts of India, visit all our different programs. It's very important. It's very important for us as the folks involved in the organization to see what's happening, and that's what keeps us motivated and keeps us going. I think one of the biggest things we talk about and request our board and our donors is to give us an opportunity to take an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours of their time if they happen to be in India and show them our programs, because ultimately, I don't think we've had anybody gone to our programs, seen them, and come back not sold on the organization.
I know, I bet.
And so that's a challenge, right? I mean, getting folks there, getting them exposed, obviously is a different kind of exposure. Bringing that here, again, the ways we have to do that is bringing folks from there and having them connect and talk, but nothing like seeing the programs on the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the ultimate.
Because and when we look at fundraising across the spectrum in the United States, corporate giving is really the smallest, right, of all the giving. People sometimes think that's where all the money is, but really it's a small sector. For you guys, though, it may even be, it's more peculiar, right? Because, again, you're sending the money to India. So do you have specific type of corporate donors, or do you even focus on that, or just focus on the events?
I think we would be in line with, that 80% comes from individuals, 15% from foundations, 5% from corporates. We're probably in line with that, but we do have some good corporate support, specifically when it comes to organizations that have some kind of work in India.
In India,
some kind of entity or some connection to India. There are a lot of foundations, corporate foundations that do support us significantly, and that's been great. Individual corporates. If you want to go into the communities here, for example, in Houston, most of our corporate support here is typically in the form of sponsorships for a gala, and that's again much more of a local initiative and a local reason. But having said that, we're making some inroads, and but I do think it typically will require some kind of a relationship in India of that given organization, or an organization that's looking to do something significant in the space. For example, we just got a pretty significant grant from Google for some work in technology.
Oh, nice. That's good.
They're supporting us, and so that's stuff like that comes along.
Did you get that money, Asha? Did you get the Google
No,
money?
not me. Somebody, the president from San Francisco chapter.
Oh, excellent.
And they're getting Sundar Pichai to be their keynote speaker at their gala.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Yes.
so that's pretty huge. For
That's
Pratham,
really big. So who are some of the bigger corporate sponsors that people would know here in Houston?
In Houston, Wells Fargo.
Okay.
And all the local banks, IMG
Yeah.
Bank, and then the BBVA, Compass.
So banks have been good.
Yeah. We have a few banks, and we have a few wealth managers. Typically, financial institutions. We also have obviously some accountants and tax consultants. And again, you can see the trend, but it's more people that have a relationship probably with a donor or a board member who's twisting their arm to be there, or two, a vested interest in being part of the creme de la creme of the Houston community to make some networks. So.
I think also what works for us is for the last 7 years we have received the highest stars from Charity Navigator, which is 4 stars.
That's fantastic.
That's 7 years in a row. So I think the work speaks for itself.
Yeah.
So
do you talk about that a lot when you?
Absolutely, because
should,
that's the
right?
way to get your foot in the door. And in Houston, in 2017, Houston was one of the top 10. Pratham was one of the top 10 charities here.
Really?
In Houston, yes,
Wow.
in the top 10 list by Houston Chronicle.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's significant. Caroline Sharpless wants to know, what is your strategy for managing large, sophisticated donor groups? Vikas?
So, it's a combined effort between the team on the ground in India and the development team here in the U.S. What we like to do is we try to get in front of them as much as we can, and you got to keep your donors updated. Obviously during the proposal process, we put into place very effective reporting mechanisms, and we're a very data-driven organization. So we're great at collecting data and showing the impact through data. So it's getting them to get out to India and see the programs that they're supporting is an absolute must. Getting in front of them at least a couple of times a year, making sure they're invited or part of the key things that are happening around the country. We're inviting to our gala some significant donors from all around the country to be our guests. And come and join us and see another part of the organization and meet with other significant donors. And so those are some of the tools that we kind of look at.
Is Houston the largest Indian community in the United States?
I don't believe so. I think
it's probably one of the top 4.
Yeah,
I think the tri-state, when you talk about New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, that kind of is probably the largest. I think, and then Chicago, LA.
So the big cities really
Houston,
are the,
it's probably the 4th.
But Houston is in the top 5 for sure.
Or 5th,
yeah, very good. LaTanya Julian has a good question. She wants to know, do you ever use sort of satellite communications to talk with donors and what's going on in India?
Yes, in fact, we have a board meeting tomorrow, and we are going to be talking with somebody who's studying at Harvard right now. And then our CEO from India, Dr. Rukmini Banerjee, she will join us on Skype in our board meetings, because it's very important for the board members here who don't travel as much as we do to know what's happening there, and that's a very it's a part of many of our meetings always.
Does the president, what was her name, Dr.?
Rukmini Banerjee.
Does she come to the United States a lot?
She's coming for the gala. She comes for all the major galas in the country. Yeah.
She's probably in the U.S. on average 3 times a year. We have 2 gala seasons, spring and fall, and then she's got to be in front of the Googles and the Skolds and and the Hewlett-Packard Foundation, and our big foundations obviously require a lot more stewarding, and so they expect to hear from senior leadership, from the ground. So they're here often.
Let's see 1 or 2 more questions. So let's do this one. So Jocelyn Gariba wants to know, how would you describe the ideal relationship between a fundraiser, the lead fundraiser, and the president? What's the ideal relationship for that?
Minimum 100 texts during the day, at a minimum.
Really? Do you text a lot?
This time of the year, yes,
Really?
because there's so many things. Sometimes you don't have time to email, and you need an instant response. So we are both pretty much on call. As much as our other the spouses hate it, but they'll get to it for the next 6 weeks. So.
And what would you say, Vikas?
I think having a great relationship is very important, and having a mutual respect of each other.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times you may run into, a situation where the chapter president may have a whole different way or approach and think they're the president of the chapter or a president of an organization. They're the decision makers and they know what's best, and so I think having that mutual respect is very, very important. I think we have a pretty good dynamic between Asha and I. The texting and stuff is there, but something comes up and we're very much on top of getting each other's opinions, making sure we're in sync before making any commitments or making any presentations or whatnot. So that's just having that working relationship that's mutually respectful is very, very important.
Asha, for you, where does your passion come from in terms of doing this? Is it a passion to give back? Is a passion for Pratham? And where does that passion? Where's that?
It's passion to give back for sure, but it's something that I've learned from my parents. As you said, I grew up in very modest conditions too. My parents struggling very hard to make sure that the children were very well educated. And education is what got us here, and we did well. And fortunately for me, my husband supports me 200% in whatever I do. He's equally passionate. So I think that's my driving force. I can't think of myself doing anything else other than what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
It's
Isn't that
the most
amazing?
fulfilling thing I'm doing.
Everyone wants a board president just like you, Asha.
And every president that we have had has been like this.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
just me. It's every single president we have
It's
had.
amazing. So let me ask you a couple fun questions to finish it up. Your favorite restaurant in town, Asha?
Caracol. I'm headed there tonight.
Caracol,
Yes,
really?
I'm headed
Isn't
there
that
tonight.
great?
It is.
It's a
It is.
great
Never,
restaurant.
never, ever had a bad experience.
Yeah,
Always
yeah.
very good.
Vikas?
So I actually like hole in the walls.
Yeah.
And I love Indian food.
Yes.
And there's this street, Hillcroft, off
Yeah.
of 59, that has all the Indian
Yeah.
restaurants. And there's this one little place called Bombay Sweets that has like a $7.99 vegetarian buffet
been
that you
there.
can't beat.
Yeah, no, but I cook Indian food every
Yeah.
single evening, so
I
I don't
want
want to eat
something
it. Yeah,
different.
I don't want to eat
And
it.
I
when
don't.
eat
So
out, yeah.
I love that place. A lot of great places right
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Wow, very good. And when you think about Houston, Asha, favorite sort of place in Houston that maybe people don't know about? Just in general, like a park or a venue, someplace that sort of a little secret in Houston? Do you have any?
There's a park very close
Yeah.
to my house that I
Yeah.
take my dog to, and I
Yeah.
think not too many people know about that because I
Yeah.
don't see too many people there.
Yeah.
And that's my favorite place to just go and hang out
Wow.
and de-stress and let the dog run wild. So.
Excellent. Do you have a favorite little
I
place?
do, and actually mine happens to be a park as well.
Same park. You
Not
go
the
there.
same
the same
one,
park.
not the
We
same
live-
one,
yeah.
different part of town, but I live in the museum district, and outside of Herman Park, they opened up that Centennial Garden, which has the
Oh
little...
my word, isn't that
and
fantastic?
it's beautiful, and it's for me, fortunately, it's like a 10-minute walk from my house,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just a beautiful place to go and unwind, have a little picnic. If you have little ones, it's
Yeah.
great because they love to go and just run around.
And they just use up all that energy,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
So
Yeah,
that's-
but the best thing is leave the phones at home and then go to the park because otherwise there's no relaxation. Yeah.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And when they make, when Hollywood or Bollywood makes your life stories, who do you want to play you guys? Who's going to play you?
Hopefully hopefully they'll cast me. I mean,
Yeah, why not? I think we are good enough. Yeah.
There you go. You guys are going to let me have this. Wow, very much. Asha Dhume, Vikas Bahl, thank you guys very much for
Thank
the
you
work that
for
you do
having us,
for our
yeah.
community and for the work that you're doing. And thanks so much for being here. So
Thank you.
Thanks
Very
for having
good.
us.
Hey, that's it for the Nonprofit Leadership Studio. Keep up the great work, guys, and we'll see you next time. And I believe next time, as we're going to see some great presentations. Take care.